hay que ponerle un nombre, un rostro.
Te vamos a encontrar, te vamos a encontrar.
Y que vienen todas las demandas internacionales.
Una ciudad tan complicada como es la Ciudad de México.
Ya llegamos a Aguililla, esta ciudad, la entrada a la tierra caliente.
Shaddock logró sobrevivir estando 90 días perdido en alta mar. Buscaba estar en soledad, alejado de la civilización. Años antes había sido diagnosticado con cáncer de colon. La enfermedad en ese momento estaba muy avanzada y decidió cambiar su estilo de vida. Dejó de ser técnico especialista en tecnologías, trabajando para una empresa IBM, y buscó curarse con métodos alternativos, con una vida holística, naturista, bien solitaria.
Bueno, emprendió un viaje por China, por la India, llegó a México poco antes de iniciar la pandemia. Quería regresar a su país natal, a Australia, pero ese país había cerrado sus fronteras y no lo pudo hacer. Compró un pequeño catamarán, vivió en Puerto Vallarta casi 2 años y se preparó para lo que sería su gran travesía. Quería cruzar el océano Pacífico. Esta es la historia que hoy le vamos a platicar de este hombre que estuvo 3 meses sin poder comunicarse con nadie, sin comida, prácticamente sin agua, en alta mar. Este es un reportaje especial de Todo Personal.
¿Se imagina estar en alta mar 90 días, sin vela, sin motor, sin comida, sin agua? Vamos a ver el día de hoy cómo sobrevivió Shaddock. Timothy, tell me first a little bit about you. Why were you just on your boat by yourself? Who is Timothy?
That's a good question. I think that was the question I was asking myself. You know, the world had changed so much. We had pandemics and I had my own health crisis as well, and found myself a long way from home. And in the end, I decided to sail.
A raíz de que le detectaron cáncer de colon a Tim, él decide empezar a comer todo crudo. Dice que para sentirse mejor. Incluso años antes había hecho ya ayunos prolongados, solamente ingiriendo jugos verdes.
Yeah, I kind of, my intention was to go very quiet and be in nature. That was the most healing place for me. But it sort of led me to so many places, you know. I found myself all over the world, but and in very remote regions of Australia as well. So the pandemic was quite a shock for everybody, and especially for Australians overseas, because we were not allowed home. There was maybe 20,000 Australians that could not get home, so that changed a lot for me.
Before going to La Paz and before getting this catamaran boat, you went to San Miguel de Allende and to Querétaro and all that part of Mexico, and that's where you met Bella. Tell me about Bella. How was your love story?
Oh, my love story. Like all love stories, it was quite tumultuous. You know, there was I was living very differently. I was going out to the mountains, and I was. I guess I'm used to very quiet, rough country, and that's what appealed to me about the middle of Mexico during a pandemic. Everyone was self-isolating, and Bella liked to be climbing out in the mountains, and she just kept following me, so that was how we met, and she gave me a lot of tough love.
Bella no tenía un hogar, y desde que conoció a Shaddock lo siguió por donde fuera. Tim buscaba un mejor lugar para la perra, ya que él, siendo un nómada, sentía que no la podía cuidar.
The tough love, yeah. Well, you know, all relationships have their ups and downs, and I think that's why we loved each other so much, is that we were both kind of gypsies, as it were, you know, in this world. She was running around without a home, and so was I. This was the interesting part, is I felt bad about Bella's not being looked after. Even though she'd come from a rough place, I felt a dog like her needed a better home than what I could give her, especially on a small boat. So I looked for homes for her. She kept escaping and finding me, and so I thought, well, we're meant to be together.
Which is the farthest place you left her and she came back?
It would have been in San Miguel de Allende, and I left her right up in the mountains where she had a big community of other dogs, probably from the litter of dogs. She was still a puppy, and I went all the way into town, and then one day I saw her I was coming out of La Coma, and that's quite a big market, and there she was in the food bin. And following me. And then she followed me all the way back to another little place called Las Frales, which is sort of like a place where I rented an apartment there.
De San Miguel de Allende, Tim viaja en coche a Puerto Vallarta. La perra no dejó que nadie la bajara del vehículo. Y así es como llegó, después de horas en carretera, a Puerto Vallarta.
And she was a very strong dog. She would make friends with everybody, but not everybody liked big dogs. So some people had chihuahuas or other things, and she liked everybody, but not everybody liked her.
Tim, there was a story that you gave away Bella.
Oh, I did not give Bella away. I was always concerned for her health. I'm a dog lover, and so what happened was I was in very poor health when I arrived, and I was offered the opportunity for someone to look after her for me, and I was so grateful for that, because having her survive and be so strong and looked after, she's in a lot better condition now than when I had her, so I'm very, very grateful for the help with her.
So you bought this boat.
Sí.
You started living on this boat.
Yeah.
How big was it?
It was a 30-foot catamaran, which is quite small for this type of boat. And we lived on that every night for 2 years together. So we only stayed on the water for the whole 2 years before we sailed the Pacific.
And then one day, what happened in your mind? How did you decide to sail the Pacific?
Oh, well, I'd been planning for the 2 years to sail the Pacific, so it was an adventure that I was always going to turn back from if everything was not right. So I would do many sea trials. The Sea of Cortez is a good place to trial at sea, so it was one of those things where I was testing myself, testing the boat, and it took 2 years, and you had to do it at the right time.
El náufrago quería llegar desde La Paz, Baja California, a la Polinesia Francesa. Y había cruzado parte del Mar de Cortés cuando viajó de Puerto Vallarta al lugar que sería su puerto de salida.
Original destination was it's interesting because in sailing terms, many sailors will say this, especially solo sailors, that you might change your destination depending on the currents and winds. But French Polynesia and Hukahiva was some of the first islands. But I was looking to cross the Pacific in the trade winds and go a slightly different route at different points of the voyage.
Y se preparó para el viaje. Llevaba un desalinizador de agua, muchas latas y una pequeña hornilla para cocinar que perdió en una marejada intensa.
I was trying a lot of provisions, because my boat could not carry a lot of water and fuel. Many boats can carry a lot more than what I can carry, so I ended up carrying a lot of stored food, dried food, canned fish, and I stored. I was growing sprouts for so the boat was sort of growing its own. I like raw food a lot. I like a lot of raw vegetables, and so that was a way to have fresh salads while I was at sea.
And how many days were you sailing normal until you had the tragedy?
It would have been about 6 weeks of good sailing before I was drifting, but I was drifting favourably with the currents. So that was one positive part about it, is the currents, the trade winds are all moving in that direction until, because I left late in the season, the hurricanes, and I got caught in a kind of a current which is well known near the equator. I didn't expect the hurricane to be moving out to sea like it was, and I didn't expect to have equipment failure.
How was that day, the day that all the wind started blowing very hard?
That was the wind and the big swell, like, you know, so the boat is a small boat and you've got mostly 7-foot waves coming, and so you're always rocking. So that's what's so tiring, is the boats, even to do anything at all on the boat, it's moving with the swell. So I was worried for Bella, and but I was also enjoying the remoteness of the ocean. Like, I have a love for, it's the last wild nature, the last wild habitat, the biggest in the world, really. No lights. The Pacific is one of the purest last wild areas on the planet, and that the fish that were coming out of that spot is renowned for being the purest and the best ecosystem in the world.
Aún estando a la deriva, pasaron semanas enteras antes que empezara a angustiarse. Y fue el día que perdió su arpón. Sin él, no podía pescar.
Look, what happened was my spear gun failed. I was free diving off the boat, which is quite dangerous alone, and I was spear fishing, and the spear gun broke. I caught many before it broke, so the line broke, and then the spear disappeared into the sea, and then some sharks kept biting my fishing lines, and so there were a lot of sharks.
So you dived with the sharks?
See, yeah, the sharks were, you know, they were fine. Like, they're not real predators when there's a lot of abundance, and you know, I've never had a problem with sharks before, so it was a very beautiful experience.
Tell me about the day you lost the sails.
Well, that was a tough part because it broke off the top of the mast, and so I was having to climb the mast to try and fix it. And with the boat swaying like it was, that's what was dangerous and fatiguing for me. So I was more worried about, I thought I was okay out there, but I was losing a lot of energy climbing the mast, and it's quite dangerous when the boat's rocking at sea like that.
And where was Bella when the boat was rocking that hard?
Well, this is the thing. She seemed to be so strong and happy. She would walk all the way around the boat, and at times she would slip and fall in the water. And so I was afraid to lose her as well. I'd pulled her back onto the boat a few times. And
did you have to go in the water to get her?
Both times I managed to just stay on the boat and pull her in. But one time I had to go in the water for her, and I was worried about sharks with her, and I was worried that she was very smart though. She knew, you know, she was a very clever dog.
Nunca les faltó agua potable, y eso les salvó la vida.
That was interesting because the water was getting very low after the first 6 weeks of sailing. I couldn't carry a lot, and so I was pumping a seawater purifier maker that actually makes water, a water maker. So it was a desalinization unit. So, but that's only makes a tiny amount of water. So when the rains came near the equator, I was collecting it in the sails and into buckets, and we collected a lot of water like that.
And how many fish did you have to get a day?
I would usually just catch one and eat the fish that I ate, because I didn't have any refrigeration. I didn't have enough power for that. So I was just, one fish would be enough, a big fish would be enough for me and Bella, or a small shark.
All raw?
All raw. Yeah, I lost my cooking. That was another story.
And tell me something, how does raw shark taste?
Surprisingly nice. I mean, I never thought I'd eat raw shark. I was a raw vegan for a long time, actually. But I needed the energy at sea, and the raw shark was maybe I was just very hungry. I don't know. Bella liked it too.
She liked everything?
Well, no, there was some things, you know, I was just writing in my book, one of the toughest moments was killing a bird. because there was like these ducks that had wings like eagles, and so these ducks were sort of. She wouldn't eat the ducks.
Tell me how far the ducks were inside the EC, because I think that you get the ducks and the birds when you're closer to land.
Well, that's what I thought too, but these were way out at sea, and they would fly for a long way, and they would just live on the boat. There were so many of them that would be flying and coming back. Yeah.
How about, which one was your favorite time there at sea, when you were alone and just
Bella and I would love to sit on the net on the back of the catamaran, and I would free dive deep into the ocean, and there'd be manta rays, there'd be dolphins, and I'd be in the middle of the most remote sea in the world underwater. And and turtles, you know, I mean, you live for moments like that.
You know what I would think? Maybe, I think I would have been panicked to be at sea with no communications, not knowing what was going to happen to me, and you seem to be happy.
Yeah, look, I had some communication, and I seem to be very happy in the purest parts of nature, you know, the purity of the air and the water and the wildlife. There were moments, but it was quite magical.
And which was your toughest time?
The toughest time was the realization that I was not getting stronger, I was getting weaker, and the storm was coming. And
the storm came?
And the storm was very close. Tuni picked me up before it came, and so the Tuni and the ship, these men were very clever with hurricanes, so they were used to running from them and finding the best spots.
Después de casi 3 meses a la deriva, Tim pensó que no iba a sobrevivir. Un hombre de más de 1,80 m, pesando 45 kilos. A él se le habían acabado las fuerzas. 2 días antes de ser rescatado, se había acostado pensando que era su momento de morir, hasta que un buque atunero lo encontró.
Tenemos unos radares a bordo que ven a 30, 40 millas y ven las sombras, ven pájaros incluso volar. Y entonces vieron un objeto flotante que no sabían lo que era. Entonces el capitán, pensando que ese objeto flotante podría llevar pescado abajo, que ocurre mucho, peces, porque buscan la sombra y puede haber atún, mandó el helicóptero. Entonces fue el helicóptero, vio que había un hombre tapándose los ojos por la luz y con la manita haciendo así, muy debilitado, y traía una perra al lado y estaba ya sin vela. Una tormenta le había tirado la vela, se la había llevado, inundó el barco, no tenía comunicación porque se había mojado todo el equipo, y en ese momento pues llamaron al barco, dijeron: aquí hay un náufrago que hay que salvar de verdad.
Las leyes marítimas y más en aguas abiertas exigen que si se rescata un náufrago, este sea llevado de inmediato a la costa. Para un barco atunero como el que rescató a Tim, dejar de pescar para regresar antes de tiempo tiene unos costos económicos enormes.
Es que en el momento que ya queda la autorización dada, ya entonces entra un protocolo, y el protocolo es que el capitán del barco, si es extranjero, tiene que comunicarlo a la embajada, tiene que comunicarlo a Gobernación, a la Secretaría, a la Dirección de Migración, y también tiene que comunicarlo al capitán de puerto del puerto donde va, que en este caso es el Manzanillo. Entonces ya rápidamente el protocolo empezó a funcionar y ya pues dejaron de la zona de pescar y ya para traer al náufrago.
Y don Antonio dio la instrucción que se rescatara al náufrago. Y es así como llega el piloto Andrés Zamora por Tim.
That was quite incredible, you know. So, you know, Andrés is here today. His words were the first words that I'd heard for a long time, and they were, you know, do you have any drugs or weapons on board? And, you know, it was scary as well, you know. We were out at sea. And
Hi, sir. Do you speak English? Yeah. How are you doing? You okay? Hi, my name is Andres. We need to know if you have any drugs or weapons on board. No, I have no drugs or weapons. Are you sure? I'm sure, yeah, you can check everything.
Suddenly,
That's protocol, isn't it?
it's protocol, of course, yeah. So it was quite an incredible moment.
Se encontró con un velero y en el velero se encontraba Tim en una condición pues bastante preocupante, que difícilmente lograba en su momento levantar la mano para pedir ayuda. Y sí es importante pues también darle su lugar al capitán Orlando Cepeda, quien iba en su momento con Cristian, que es el buscador, y posterior ya se hace la localización, se avisa a la embarcación hace la llamada a la empresa, y la empresa tuvo comunicación con el señor Antonio Suárez, quien dio la indicación de atenderlo, de ayudarlo lo más pronto posible y que se parara toda pesca, que se parara toda maniobra para poder enfocarse en el rescate. Por seguridad de uno, si uno aborda una embarcación y llega a tener armas o droga, bueno, y si tú no preguntaste, pues puedes terminar involucrado en un problema, ¿no? Que es lo que nosotros menos queríamos. Entonces sí, se lo hice la pregunta y también pues preocupados porque es muy raro ver a una persona sola en medio del mar, casi siempre van en pareja o en más, y bueno, esperábamos que podía haber hasta otra persona quizá en algún estado ya ya en condiciones no favorables, ¿no? Entonces pues estamos tratando de mantener alguna conversación con él y fue muy enfático en eso, que estaba solo y que no tenía, y bueno, entonces abordé su embarcación y ya cuando vi su estado realmente dimos la comunicación con el barco. Mira, cuando subió al barco en el María Delia, él sube y pues ya platicando me abraza y se pone a llorar y pues de que estaba muy agradecido. Y él comentó que una noche antes, bueno, la noche anterior ya se había dado por vencido, ya estaba como que ya no veía salida porque venía un huracán, Calvin, que era el huracán que estaba muy próximo a él, que de hecho cuando lo rescatamos y se hizo toda la maniobra, empezamos avante para tierra por indicación de don Antonio, de llevarlo cuanto antes posible a tierra. Sí nos tocó muy mal tiempo ya, si a una embarcación como de esas dimensiones pues nos afectó bastante, imagínate un velero de ese tamaño, ¿no?
Ya pensaba que iba a morir.
Sí, él comenta eso, que ya no tenía fuerza, pero imagínate 42 kilos y su estatura es de 1,87.
Que quería cuidar mejor, le daba de comer a la perrita porque decía morir tarde o temprano.
Sí,
¿no?
tenía ese como compromiso moral, ¿sabes? Como estás aquí porque yo así lo decidí, yo te traje, entonces todo lo que pescaba Tim, se lo entregaba a Vela. Por eso era Vela, no sé si viste en las imágenes cuando llegamos, Vela estaba con muy buena condición física, pero Tim sí estaba en una condición muy mala alimenticia, ¿no?
Hoy es tu gran amigo.
Fíjate que sí se ha generado una cercanía bastante peculiar porque bueno, nos conocimos en medio del mar en unas condiciones poco común, ¿verdad?
And finally, how long did it take for Andres to see you until you got on top of the tuni boat?
Well, they were spending some time investigating the boat, and then the boat carried Bella and I back to the main boat where the captain and crew were waiting, and suddenly all these men were cheering, right? You know, and that was an amazing moment. You know, all these men, they were strong men that had been at sea a long time. They'd already been out for almost a month trying to get their quota of fish, and they'd stopped everything to come and get me, and they were cheering. You know, I thought, who are they cheering for? Is it me? You know, and I thought, oh, that's why.
Tim, your man used to be always in meditation and in very calm places, and suddenly they rescued you and you became a rock star and you're all over the tuna plant.
Oh my God, yeah.
How does that feel?
It was very tough. I mean, I realized later that all the media heard about this while we were still at sea, and I was still recovering, trying to, you know, get used to my new friends that were on the ship and who were looking after me, and I did not speak any Spanish, you know, and it did a lot for me. I had a lot of wounds on my legs that they helped heal me. There was a lot of infections and things like that, so I was very grateful.
Would you, just to finish this story, would you, if you had the decision, knowing what was going to happen to you, get on that boat to start sailing to the Polynesia again?
That's a good question. You know, the answer, I wouldn't do it. But in hindsight, I'm glad I have. But I wouldn't have done it knowing all of that. That's a good question.
But that story changed your life.
It changed my life, and it saved me, really. Like, there's some soul-searching moments you have. You know, you mentioned meditation, and these are all things that really lift your spirits when you're forced into that situation. You'd never do it if you knew, but you're glad that you have done it.
Thank you very much. Anything else you'd like to add?
I'd just like to thank Mexico and all of you people, you know, that touch my heart, because I don't always understand what you say, but I feel your heart, and I'm so grateful to Tuni and all the brave men. I'm grateful to Don Antonio for making the decision to come and get me. You know, it was not a decision every man would make, you know.
Tim, I'd like to thank you for sharing your story with me.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm very grateful, and your questions are very good and very heartfelt. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Una historia de película, la de Timothy Shaddock, y bueno, un hombre que en verdad te deja enseñanzas porque ante la adversidad, aún así te lo cuenta con mucha felicidad. Te dice que estaba en pleno mar y donde se veía un cielo precioso y donde podía bucear con tiburones y con tortugas y mantarrayas. Extraordinaria esta historia. Yo lo invito a que se una a nuestras redes sociales. Puede consultar todos los contenidos de Todo Personal en nuestro canal de YouTube en ADN 40, simplemente escaneando este símbolo QR, y ahí puede ver todos estos reportajes especiales. Sueñe bonito, descanse y por supuesto nos vemos aquí en Todo Personal. Sueña bonito, Jorge, bonita noche.
Muy buenas noches, Bibiana, muy buenas noches a todos ustedes, y recuerden, el poder y en la política, todo, pero absolutamente todo, es personal. Gracias.